is Live, Laugh, Launch,
your go-to podcast for product marketing and go-to-market strategy.
I'm Veronica.
And I'm Katie. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Live, Laugh, Launch. Today, we have Jordan Byrd with us, and I'm very excited to have her here. So Jordan is the Director of Sales at Clara, where I also currently work. She leads sales with a sharp eye for growth and a deep love of building relationships that last. She scaled teams, closed big deals, and knows how to turn go-to-market strategy into real results. At Clara, she's all about helping companies hire smarter with tech that actually works and making sure that every partner gets the most out of it. And by partner, we mean customer, because that's what we call our customers at Clara, because we like to have that true partnership with them. So, welcome to the show, Jordan. Thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This is actually my first podcast ever, so I'm very excited.
Woo! Very exciting. Yes, and our audience may notice that we are missing someone today. So Veronica, unfortunately, has a conflict. She is flying at this time, but we will definitely miss her. And I'll try to bring up things that she might ask today. But also, it's just a very cool episode because Jordan and I work together every day. So it's a different conversation than some of the previous conversations we've had on the cast. So Jordan, just kicking off, we're going to talk about sales and marketing working together because that's kind of what we know. So, and just as a refresher for everyone, I'm currently acting as head of marketing for Clara. I am going to be transitioning in a few weeks into more of a product marketing capacity where my love and my home and my heart is. But for the past 10 months, I have been leading from a full head of marketing perspective. So working with Jordan on lead gen, demand gen reporting, all the things, all the way to the product marketing and managing a team of contractors that have specialty areas across the breadth of marketing. So Jordan and I have definitely been working closely. Jordan, you've been here how long now?
It's going on, I think, 4 months. So I started back in March, early March. So
gosh.
It's been about 4 months, fastest 4 months of my life. And we've accomplished so much. Seems forever.
Yeah, my head is exploding right now because we have done a lot in 4 months together.
We really have. I know. Whenever I kind of get down on myself, we're not doing enough, I always think, okay, one, we're a startup, and then two, we have accomplished so much. And it took, I was still ramping during some of that period. So really proud of what we've done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what's good about sales and marketing working together and what can potentially go wrong. I know both of us have worked in, a bunch of different businesses and had a lot of different experiences with sales and marketing working together. As a director of sales, what is the one thing that you think marketing teams can get wrong that costs sales deals?
Starting off with the hard question.
I know. And that's why we're here.
One thing marketing is wrong. I think that in previous roles, not so much working with you, Katie, because I know we've been extra communicative and had really open and honest conversations around our relationship and our respective departments. But I think the biggest miss, if I can call it that, not necessarily a mistake or anything, but I think the biggest miss is really when marketing creates messaging that sounds really great in theory, but doesn't necessarily translate to the reality of the conversations that sales is having with buyers or with our partners. Too often it's very product centric, can be vague. An example with Clara is if you're talking about something like inclusive hiring. What does inclusive hiring mean? So I think bringing it kind of back down to not earth, but earth in a sense, to really talk through kind of the metrics behind that and how we, de-identify our platform and what true inclusive hiring means really helps deals not to get stalled or, to help that content not get, really ignored altogether.
Yeah, I've definitely had product marketing folks working with me or leading me that had us create messaging kind of in a vacuum, unfortunately. It did not work. Big shock. I personally love to work with sales among other ways of collecting data, but I think it's super helpful to either A, sit in on sales calls, or B, listen to them, and to help create that messaging in that way. But also just like to interview the salesperson, because every sales call is different. You can't listen to them all. So what are things that are coming up? And not only like director of sales level, but also your SDRs, right? Like our SDRs today brought up some really good points. And this is not the first time that they've said, hey, we're hearing this in conversation. And I said, hey, good, let me go create some content around this, because obviously that's what people want to know and want to talk about. And that's how they're thinking about it.
No, I completely agree. I think that that's an area where, like, as a team, we're certainly working on like giving that feedback. You can really get lost in the day to day. And I mean, I used to be so against recording calls, mainly because in my previous role, I worked with a lot of security professionals. And so there was kind of this overarching sense of like just distrust from the beginning. And so me recording them wasn't going to help. And then I think in my previous role to that, where I worked for 6 years, it just wasn't a thing, right? Like most of my meetings were actually just like on the phone. We weren't doing demos. We were like traveling out to do demos. It was just a different world in 2016. Yeah, it's definitely something we're certainly working on, and being able to record every conversation and share it throughout the company. Yeah, you have to be comfortable with it, but I think it's only beneficial for us and for marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So walk me through a time when maybe marketing or product marketing nailed the messaging and it actually changed how your team sold. What did that look like?
So that's a good question. So this is a really interesting example, but in really my first role ever, this time, I think I was just a senior enterprise account executive. I later became director of sales at a company I worked for, and I love the company. It was a startup, was there for many, many years. And when COVID happened, we were scrambling. Everyone else in the world, we had no idea what we were going to do. We sold software and hardware. Mm-hmm. So in hardware that went inside of like retailers, and retailers were not open during COVID.
Yeah.
So some made the choice to stay open, and they had their own form of, curbside was really born from that. You didn't see curbside a whole lot before 2020. Buy online, picking up in store was always a thing, but now it was like the only way to shop. And so for us, we sold lockers, like an Amazon locker, but for retailers. So marketing, and specifically product marketing, really looked at this as an opportunity of like, all right, how do we partner strategically with these retailers to help them face this critical issue of not being able to interact with people and get their product? So the messaging really switched pretty fast, and they were able to really come up with this like contactless solution. So everything became contactless, from going up to a locker and touching not having to touch the screen, touching your app and having a door pop open on its own. So you don't have to touch the locker. You can just grab your package, and really not having to interact with a human being. It's such a unique time we lived in that we just didn't interact with each other, but for good reason, right? No one wanted to get sick. And so that was, I would say, kind of a top of mind for me when like marketing just really nailed the messaging. Fortunately, during that time, a lot of companies, right, went through different, they scaled back production, they scaled back companies. A lot of people were furloughed. We really were able to accelerate, I think, due to a number of reasons, but really honing in on that messaging and being able to adjust really quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes me think about like today, our CEO on our team call today was just talking about how we're essentially in like the second .com bubble, like with AI, everything is changing so rapidly, and every department is having to adjust how we're doing things. And that includes sales and marketing. But also I wasn't really thinking about COVID. Like we already did that then too, right? Like we had so many different pivots across all different kinds of industries. So yeah, wow. Can't believe I forgot about those few years, but I guess
at a time. I think all of us have collectively tried to forget it. It's not easy, but it's just the world was lit on fire and it changed everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did not send this question to you, but now that I'm thinking about it, how are you thinking about sales changing in this new era of AI, are you thinking about process changes? I know the answer to some of this, but I'm going to pretend I don't.
Yeah. So my eyes have completely been opened by AI. This is the first AI company I've worked at, and I've made really a strategic move coming here because I, in a way, saw into the future. I just read some articles. You can't go anywhere without hearing about AI. I think in 2024 there was a lot of scarcity around it, and even talking to like my parents or my in-laws who are older, they would ask me questions and I didn't know how to answer it because I had no idea what this was. I used Chat GPT sometimes, right? Like that was my extent of using it. And so coming into Clara as a sales leader, the old processes and the old playbook, you have to throw it away. And like I'm still trying to hold on to some things, but it's just changed so rapidly, even within the last 4 months of me being here. And so I'm looking at using AI automation, right? So someone, follows our LinkedIn page, being able to respond to them, or somebody follows us on, some other social media platform, being able to automatically, be in their world or their sphere through messaging content, providing resources to them. So that's like version 1, pretty easy. Some of that we're doing today. I think version 2 is really looking at the sales process and looking at what we're doing today with sales development. I'm still not fully on board with like fully automating, calls and messaging. But there is something really interesting. I was actually talking to one of the contractors at Clara yesterday around AI being able to do the research for us, right? And I think that's the piece that we're starting to pull in when we are building that content. Like it has to, there's the machine learning element. It has to know our brand and our voice and what we want to say to the world, which is hard for us to trust that. But we're getting to a point where it's like, okay, we're going to test it. And so now it's that research element, being able to compile, hey, I noticed that you have 10 open roles at your company, you're on Greenhouse. Oh, we integrate with Greenhouse. So curating that messaging to that contact without me having to sit there and essentially research that for, 10 minutes, like that 10 minutes per prospect, that's a lot of time. So automation, research, and then we're kind of looking at it right now. How can it help the sales development function? I don't think it's like going to take away the sales development function. It's still very important, but I do see some other companies really opting into it. And you see mixed messages, right? Some people, it's like, I know I'm talking to a robot, and some people, they carry on with the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of an extension of like just the automation that's been put in place over the years with like, we have a power dialer, for example. And so it's just like you dial way more. It's a numbers game at that point. Like you get in front of way more people, but like you said, it is a risk, especially for companies like us who are really focused on the human element of AI and making sure there's a human in the loop and having that like really close partnership with our customers and our prospects. I think it can be tricky to know where that line is. So I'll be interested to see sort of how it evolves over time.
Yeah, me too.
And agree. Yeah. Like it's definitely different even from 4 months ago. So let's dig into a little bit about like the work that we have done together. So we started pretty bare bones. There wasn't a ton of things in place when you were here. And there was also not an in-house sales team. There was an external sales team, which means we weren't as closely aligned, unfortunately. So I was very happy to have you join us. But one of the things that we have done is just make sure, and we're still continuing to build on this, just make sure that we're sort of speaking the same language and going after the same folks. And part of that is like coordinated marketing and sales communications. So for example, we have like a new integration coming out. We integrate with applicant tracking systems. You guys have been kicking it off from the SDR side and kind of warming people up. And then we've been following up from marketing side, which some people might think is backwards, but it's not. I'll tell you why. Because we really want to get in front of people before we announce that we have that integration, so that when we are ready to do that, we have folks thinking about us, because we don't have a huge presence in the market yet, because we are a startup. We're trying to build some of that brand awareness before we just hit them with like, hey, we're integrated with the product that you use. Don't you want to work together? So I think that educational piece, but from like a human perspective, directly from a human is important. So any like things that you want to talk about in terms of kind of how we've been working together or some of the new ways that we plan to work together on campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of a key piece for us is just one, communicating around the campaigns that we're both moving forward with. I mean, today we had a conversation around intent cadences. And it's something my team is working on, basically looking at different topics that have been researched and going after prospects that might be interested in, diversity recruiting or candidate assessments, candidate scoring, pre-employment assessments. And so we've been doing that on the sales side. And I know you, Katie, are going to be doing something similar on the marketing side. And so really coming together on what that messaging is going to look like. Should we still just be going after the same people? Yes, one from the sales side, it's not a little bit more, I guess, aggressive, if you want to call it that, where there's calls, there's, LinkedIn messages, there's emails, and then marketing where it's much more nurture, informational, more of just like a nice to know, or this is something you should know. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. So it does go both ways, right? Sales could start something, marketing, and then marketing starts something, you're working through your startup campaign. So that's certainly something that we are going to look at and start collaborating with you more on. And there's so many other things I think that we could be collaborating on, but we only have so much time and we have very, strategic goals that we're aligned on. And so I think having those candid conversations and like really coming together, understanding like, when it comes to like, you have targets around leads, I have targets around revenue, like really it should be, and this is maybe a unpopular opinion, but I know we've talked about it and we've really tried to implement it, is like, how do we have kind of a shared target,
Yeah.
So I think partnership means like shared pipeline, shared revenue targets, being in the same rooms when strategies are set. And I think that's, that's where true alignment comes in. And also you just don't feel like you're working in silos anymore.
Yeah.
And there's the competition element of it because it's a very real thing. And you can feel very competitive over leads that come in because, oh, what if that lead was something that I had touched one time 6 months ago and I warmed them up, but they came in through a form fill. So who gets credit for that? It doesn't really matter at the end of the day because we do have this one revenue target. And as we look at kind of our separate teams, like in essence, like we are just one collective team all headed toward the same goal.
Yeah, I'm really glad we have that in place and also that leadership supports it.
Yeah.
The last guest we had on our podcast, Christian Vetra, he's a GTM leader. He actually said the same thing, like sales and marketing teams should be driving towards the same goal, which is revenue. And I wouldn't say it's an unpopular opinion. I would say it's an opinion that's gaining momentum and it's definitely still not the norm. But I really like the system that we put in place, guys, probably like 4 weeks ago. This is very new.
Very new.
Where maybe not even 4, maybe 3 weeks ago, where we're looking at different types of qualified leads. And some of those marketing gets credit for, some of those sales gets credit for, and some of those are shared. At the end of the day, revenue is what matters the most. So for example, for Jordan and I, marketing gets credit for inbound leads, strictly inbound. Sales gets credit for strictly outbound leads, and then events and referrals, alliances, etc. are shared leads because we're both working on those things. And I really like that. It's very egalitarian, and I'm glad we put it in place, especially because we have also gotten to a point where, we started with no marketing automation system 10 months ago when it came on. We started sort of rudimentary tracking, and then we put lead scoring in place. And then more recently, we put very strict lead scoring in place. The way that we're running it today, I do not get a lot of MQLs, and thankfully I'm still here. But the reason I don't is because we're super strictly qualifying them, and almost every single MQL turns into an SQL for sales. And that ensures that with our very small team, we're not wasting time on things that we don't need to be wasting time on. So like I said, I'm new to like the head of marketing capacity, but I do think all of these things are fairly different from what other people are doing. I think, Jordan, maybe you can correct me.
No, I mean, I think you're spot on.
It seems to be working for us. Happy to have you as a teammate.
Yes, me too. It's been, when I first came on board, our CEO made a very clear point around like wanting to, like, it's not her job to do it, but like, let's build trust. And it's not easy to build trust with somebody you don't know. And so we actually went to Arizona for what, like 6 hours?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it was maybe 6 hours. And we just spent the day together, and we didn't actually do a whole lot of work. We got some good stuff done, the things that mattered, but it really was just like building that rapport, building that trust. And like we have both you've come really from a product marketing background. I've, been in sales my entire career, but it's changed a lot throughout my career. And I've worked with marketing heavily in some roles, and then some roles like I had zero say. And I think what it boils down to is like feedback, right? And not pointing fingers, because I've been in roles where, marketing, if I didn't tag something right within our CRM, it's like, okay, we have to, and I get it, right? Your budgets are tied to events, your budgets are tied to a number of things. And so everything has to be marked correctly. Whereas I think if the lead quality isn't great, instead of just saying like, oh, this was a bad lead, it's like, we need to actually explain why, was it the title or the timing, budget, messaging? Like, why wasn't that lead a good lead, so that marketing can improve what they don't know and don't understand. So I think just building regular feedback loops into the process can really mitigate any like misfires that happen between sales and marketing.
Yeah. Man, I'm just thinking about how hot that room was, that hotel.
No, I went
That's all
back,
I can think about.
I actually went back to that same hotel with our SDRs when we did our in-person, and they did not have the fireplace on. So it was nice.
It was like, I don't even know how hot, maybe like 80 something, and they had the fireplace on when we were there. It's core memory now. So funny. What is one difference between the sales enablement piece, so a deck or other messaging or ROI tools, etc., that you use regularly and that you totally ignore?
I would say like usable assets, or like just short visual one pager, something that like is really tied to what that buyer's question is, which is in our industry, like pretty much the same question, like how much money is this going to save me?
Yeah.
What's the ROI? Things around the ethical nature of AI and how our algorithms are built. So I've gotten deep into the weeds with some of our partners. And so while those research papers aren't necessarily like the most fun thing to read, it is something I use quite frequently. But I would say one pagers that really help answer like, why now? How does this compare to X? Get used all the time. Infographic, I use it all the time. I think a good example is our ROI calculator. While it's not something tangible, it is a sales enablement piece that we created to help frame our impact in terms of, dollar. I will say sending decks, I rarely do. I don't think I've ever, I've sent one pitch deck. But
that's interesting, because I think either that's changing or it's a little different from what I've experienced in the past. Because
it's different. Yeah, it's definitely different from what I've experienced in the past as well. I'm shocked at myself.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of requests because I was in content for so long, but there are kind of three things I get the most: one pagers, decks, specific decks, and specific competitive intel, and often comparison charts, which I typically do not do for many reasons. But I think by the way, thank you for not asking me for one pager every week.
You're welcome.
Because I've definitely been in the situation where it's like, I need a one pager for this and this and this. And I have to shut them down and say, how many times are you going to use this? Because we can't create a one pager for every single thing, for every single person.
We're lucky in the sense that most of our partners, like, we do a number of things very well, but like the pain that we're solving is pretty consistent across the board. It's either around like scoring and, oh my gosh, I'm getting thousands upon thousands of resumes. How am I going to go through all these resumes? and sorting those for our partners and screening those ethically, or it is, hey, we don't want to pay for personality assessments. We do want something more skills based. We do care about, mitigating bias within our hiring process. So it might be more of a compliant buy, like, hey, let me make sure I have Clara just from a compliance standpoint. So I think overall, like, we don't have people coming to us with different use cases. They're all pretty similar. I think as we expand into sourcing and some other the stuff we're working on at the end of this year, that might change. But I won't come to you every week for a new.
I do appreciate it. However, I am writing down currently that we need some more compliance content. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, you want to make sure you have enough content across the different stages to be speaking to the prospects and later the clients' problems, challenges you're solving. That's the most important thing. And I think it's interesting you said that about us having pretty specific challenges that we're solving, because when I've gotten most of those requests, they've been in multi-channel, multi-industry, huge feature set companies. And so it makes sense I would get asked a lot more for those things. Even then, you have to say no to some things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, who knows where there's so many things we're creating, but and maybe this is not what you want to hear, but I've always been very resourceful. And there was a time, way back in the day where I would create some of my own content. I don't know if I had a marketing team, so I would just create it, right? I started my career as a sales coordinator. And so a lot of that content, I was just creating. And so I'm very comfortable. I think visually, I think my eye isn't as sharp as it used to be when it comes to how aesthetically something looks. But when it comes to content, I feel really comfortable. But obviously, you're very masterful when it comes to content. And, we have wonderful designers on our team. So it's great to have not only their input, but them really helping us out.
Yeah, I think that's where most marketing teams get nervous, is just the branding aspect. If sales is creating decks and they look like PowerPoint 2003. That could be an issue. Luckily, I'm not a branding person, so I don't get as ruffled by these things. But yeah, that's totally the issue usually. So how do you think that we can take our sales and marketing relationship to the next level? What are you looking forward to over the next 3 to 4 months that we can work on together?
So I know your role is changing a bit, and you're really going to be focused in on product marketing, which I'm really excited about for you, because I know that's your bread and butter content. That's what you came into Clara as. I think just getting involved even earlier in the process, even before messaging is kind of locked and loaded. Marketing, sharing the why behind, why we're launching something, and then us, giving you more feedback from the field. I think that's something that I just really need to work on, especially when it comes to some of the objections that we're seeing, because we can certainly overcome some of those. Some are budget related or timing, not the right person, but those are overcomable, right? We've all been in those situations. And so how do we speak to that and really spell out a compelling ROI that's concise and just hits our prospects in the right spot? I think too, working more on what the buyer journey looks like, which includes our talk tracks or our objection tracks as well, competitive angles. We have great competitive intel right now, but really utilizing that and understanding the current landscape, because we know what we do differently at Clara, where we're differentiated, but it's not always the easiest to explain, because it does involve it's AI, right? This is new for everyone. And so as we go through our algorithms, it's not always the easiest thing to articulate. So there's a number of things I'm hopeful for. I think just we're in the really special place right now with our company. We're seeing a lot of traction, which is great. And so I'm excited to continue testing out different markets, testing out, different potential buyers, and just getting more involved earlier in the process.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to doing more product marketing specific work, because I have been sort of overseeing all aspects of marketing, I haven't been able to dive in on those things, as you know, as we've talked about. And so exactly what you said, like I want to be ingesting more competitive market intel and also spinning that back out to you guys in a way that makes sense. Getting just closer knit on that messaging, positioning for sure, and just really having the time to dig into some of those aspects that I haven't been able to do. So, Jordan, we're going to wrap up here, but I want to ask you one question before we leave. For other sales leaders who are listening, what is your number one tip for getting more value out of your relationship with marketing?
I think you're going to like this answer. I would say treat marketing like a strategic partner and not like a service center.
Okay, yes.
No, but really, like bring them into deals, share what's working, what's not working, just loop them in early, right? I think more context that you all have, the more powerful and relevant. So strategic partner, and that's not just marketing, that's product.
Yeah.
That is every single department that surrounds you.
Yeah, I was going to add that on too. I'm glad you said that, because especially from a product marketing standpoint, like we really do need to know all the things and understand what's happening with you guys so we can make changes in marketing, but also recommend things for the roadmap, or, you know, look at competitive stuff and recommend things, or think about what the greater market is doing. So yes, again, Jordan, thank you. It's great to have a partner like you in sales, and appreciate you coming on the cast today.
Thank you so much, Katie.
All right. Bye.